Today, we're going to talk about how we can use Anvil X to add whole new capabilities to our dashboard. Specifically, we're going to take everyone's favorite dashboard, Superstore, and we are going to add a chat feature to it. So we're going to try to create a new way for our users to interact with our dashboard by giving them a place where they can carry on a conversation, in this case, with respect to profitability by state. And so it's a simple example, but really what we're trying to do is sort of showcase some of what you can do with Anvil X as you're looking to do more with your dashboards and kind of extend into the space of Tableau extensions. We're going to start with our Superstore dashboard. As I said, our goal is going to be to add a whole new feature to this so we can have a conversation. To do that, we're going to start by going into our browser, navigating to anvil.works. We will start building, and we want to create a Tableau extension. So when you first load a Tableau extension, you have your design pane and your code pane. So the design pane is really where you're going to be starting from in terms of dragging and dropping the user interface that you want to create. Whereas the code pane is where you're going to wire up your components to specific Python functions and generally like drive the behavior of this extension the way we want it to. Let's just get started by throwing a hello world on our UI. So in Anvil, all of our UI components, in fact, everything is represented as a Python object. And so specifically when this page is opened up as an extension on our Tableau dashboard, it's going to, initialize a instance of form 1. So it's a init is going to get called. And the first thing we want to do in that init is hello world. We'll print that. Test in Tableau. The T-Rex file that we can download here is the file that we use so that Tableau knows that the extension, which is a web application, is trusted and that that's the one that we want to use for the purposes of bringing this extension into the dashboard. And now I can open up my Tableau dashboard and I will drag my extension onto the dashboard and load a local extension. So my extensions, and I'll direct it to the chat extension. And just like that, we've got an extension deployed. If we flip back to Anvil here, we're going to see that our hello world that we printed is showing up in the Tableau output here. And that it's a really handy feature as you're building out these extensions. You can always just print something to sort of see what's going on, just the way you would when you're working on a Jupyter notebook or with a Python script. It's just a rapid way to debug and sort of understand what's taking place in your dashboard. And this is how I'm going to get at the dashboard object, which is api.getDashboard. And this is going to give me the object representation of the Tableau dashboard in which the extension is embedded. And this is great. This is going to give us basically the key access point for any of the key things that we want to do. So if I say dashboard, I'm going to be able to see all of the data sources. I can get them by name, or I can get a list of all data sources in the workbook. I can get parameters, worksheets. I can refresh data sources. There's a whole bunch of different capabilities here, which are described in the documentation. But that's kind of the key accessor here, and that's going to help us take action in this case. So for this specific instance, our desired behavior is that somebody clicks on a state and basically pulls up all the conversation that's been had to date, where they can participate in that. So to do that, we're going to first create a selection event, and it takes an event argument. Come back to that, and we want to register that now with our dashboard. So we say dashboard.register event handler. It's going to give us the option of registering a filter changed, parameter changed, or selection changed event. In this case, we want to go ahead and register a selection changed. And we will pass then reference to that selection event function that we just defined. So now when we come back down here, we can see that that event object is going to get picked up as a mark selected event. And we can see what methods is available to us. So we can see the worksheet where the event took place, and we can get specifically the things that were selected. So that's probably what we want. We're going to call out those get selected marks. And for now, let's just print those. So just like that, I've pulled in our dashboard object. I've registered an event handler, and now we're printing whenever someone makes a selection. We'll rename this to profitability discussion. I will add a text area from the UI components. I'm going to add a button to save a comment. And I will can change the text the button shows here. As I said earlier, everything is an object, and so these buttons and text areas that I'm adding are also going to be exposed as objects in the code view, and so it's helpful to give them like code names. And so we'll change it from button1 to button save comment and text area comment. Now, when I actually click this button, I want to be saving that. So let's we have to basically bind an event handler to our button as well. It's going to work very similarly to the selection event that we defined earlier. We have to write a function that's that's a Python function that gets called whenever that event takes place. In other words, someone clicks this button. So let's double click there, and that's a sort of shorthand that Anvil exposes for us to be able to automatically sort of generate the signature for this button save comment click event handler that we're defining now. And we can now just write whatever we want to have happen in Python for when that button occurs. Specifically, in this case, what we want to do is we want to save the comment that someone made. And so what that's going to require us to do is persist data. Anvil provides a data table construct, which is like a simplified database. And that's going to then give us a way to save the data that we want to save, namely the comments that people are making over the course of this discussion. So on our left here, we see a bunch of the different tools that Anvil exposes to us, one of which is data. So if I click on data, I can add a new table, and we'll call this our comments table. And we'll want to add a comment field. We'll want to make sure we know what state it is. We want to know when that comment occurred. And eventually we might want to add things like the user that made that comment. We might want to save the profitability when that comment was made. But for now, we'll just start with these three columns. So this is pretty powerful. What we've just done is basically defined this data table that we can then start collecting these comments in. This data table is exposed to Tableau. So if we wanted to then plug Tableau into this data table, then that, we can start pulling that data into our visualization, which is really powerful. The next video after this one is going to talk about how you can extend this comment app to basically provide a way to like override or make suggestions to the data that's represented in the dashboard. So if you're interested in that, definitely take a look at our next video. For now, we're just going to want to save the comment that someone has written in that text area when someone clicks on that save button. So we'll get our comment as the text of our text area. So this text area is, again, a Python object, and the text attribute is specifically what's been written by the user in that component. We will want to get the timestamp for the current time. This is running Python in the browser, and a lot of the Python libraries that we know and love are going to be available, including datetime. So we'll say from datetime import. And we can capture when this comment's being made. And then we actually want to capture the state. So how are we going to get the state? We are capturing it as a list of dictionaries through the selected marks, but we now want to make sure that we can basically capture this value, in this case, California, so we can use it later in our save comment. To do that, we'll actually attach the state as an attribute to this form. So again, everything is an object. And so, Python allows us to attach kind of any type of attribute we need to an object. And we can simply say that we want to get our event.getSelected marks. We will take the first thing that was selected. So if someone, selected the whole country, we're kind of arbitrarily taking a single one, but for now, we'll just go ahead with that. So what we'll do is we'll say that our selection is equal to event.getSelected marks. And we'll just take the first index of that, so the 0th index of that selection. So in other words, if someone selected a bunch of states that dragged over the entire US, we're just going to take one of the first states somewhat arbitrarily. But for now, that's going to be enough to give us something to work with. And we can say that the new attribute we're defining, self.state, is going to be equal to the selection. And we got to get that state key, which we can just capture from our printed statement down here. And now we're basically ready to save this comment when someone makes that click. We're going to say app tables.comments, that comments table we defined earlier. We'll add a row where our comment is the comment we captured from the text area. On is the date time we just captured. And the state is the self.state attribute that we saved from the selection event. If I go back to our dashboard, again, I'm going to refresh this. Say Oregon. I can save that comment. Nothing's happened in the UI, but if I come into my comments table and refresh it, great, we have captured that data. So really one of the last steps we have to take here is to expose this information that's being collected from users. And we can do that by adding a new UI component called the data grid. So we'll come back to our design pane and we will take our data grid here and be able to define its columns. We're going to say state, and we'll point to key state, which is the key in our comments table. This is just sort of shorthand to provide the value here. You can get a lot more specific about how this data is represented and add a bunch of other UI components. If you double click on this, it'll actually pull up the view here for you to get more specific. You can drag your own UI components in, but again, for now, let's just go ahead and define our columns as state, comment to our, hide that, to our comment, and our timestamp on to our key on. So we have our UI defined. Now we've got to wire this up. So let's add a new function to our code view for refreshing comments. In this case, we're going to use that same self.state, and we'll say that our repeating panel, which is a basically what's populating our data grid. You can learn more about repeating panels and how those work in Anvil at the link below. And we can say items is going to be equal to our app tables and our comments table, and we'll search for where our state is equal to self.state. And we want to refresh our comments basically whenever someone makes a selection. And whenever someone adds a new comment. Now, if we go back to our UI and reload again, when we click on Washington, we'll say Washington had a great quarter because of the mild weather. I'll save that comment. And that's persisted now. If I go back and try to view that comment that we saw in Oregon earlier, I click on Oregon, and it's going to load that earlier comment. And just like that, we've kind of completed what we set out to do. We have our Superstore dashboard, and we've added a chat feature to that. If we go back to see what exactly we've done so far, we imported our dashboard object. We registered an event handler for when someone makes a selection. We have got a UI component so that somebody can make a comment, and then when someone does make a comment or selects a state, we're showing all of the other comments that have been made.